How to read sheet music. Now that we know some of the fundamental intentions behind the organization of sheet music, we can focus on how to read sheet music. Music notation was invented to preserve an original moment of inspiration. Composers assimilate oral musical ideas and write it out on physical paper for others to read. The hope is to communicate this oral musical idea as accurately as possible by using the music notation system. You should be aware and understand that just because composers use this doesn't make it overly hard to understand. They in fact use this to make their message to the performers much easier to understand than just with words. The notation system is designed so that almost any instrument using standard tuning can read sheet music. You will see that this system aligns with the piano keys, and that the piano utilizes two staves, called the grand staff, allowing it the flexibility to play most music ever written. You can see that all the possible pitches in the modern notation can be identified by one of 7 letters: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and they will be on either a line or an open space. As previously discussed in the Intro to Music Theory video, each one of these letters represents a subdivision of the octave. An octave can be subdivided into 8 pitches, which forms a heptatonic scale, with the first pitch being repeated at the end. Each pitch can be further specified as sharp or flat with these symbols. Sharp means a half step up, and flat means a half step down. Here are all the possible pitches that can be expressed: G sharp slash A flat, A sharp slash B flat, B, C, C sharp slash D flat, D sharp slash E flat, E, F sharp slash G flat, G sharp slash A flat. I say the same as because these are called enharmonic equivalents, which along with scales will be further explained in the video about keys. Because keys in transposing instruments can be confusing, we will focus on notation for standard tuning instruments. However, you can find several instruments that read the same notes as different pitches because that instrument was built to sound in a different key. For example, clarinets and trumpets built in B flat will have to modify the reading of notes by a whole step, which means if a note is notated as C, a B flat instrument player is supposed to read that as a B flat. The first sign you will notice on the staff is the clef. There are 4 possible clefs your instrument will use. The most popular clefs used are treble and bass clefs. There are also alto and tenor clefs. The piano uses the grand staff and has a treble clef for the higher notes to be played on the right hand, and the bass clef for the lower notes to be played by the left hand. The indicated clef will identify the range of pitches that will be used. Pitch identification helps us find out which note is which. All the pitches selected for a piece of music can be identified by where they are positioned on the staff. There's a staff. It is made up of 5 lines and uses the spaces between each line and the lines as well to express pitches, which are the exact notes measured at a specific frequency to play at a certain moment in time. Be sure to use the note/hertz diagram for more help. It will be of use to compare the examples to where they would be on the piano. Also, be aware that the next pitch higher than G will always be A because the pitch sequence loops after the first 7 letters. Therefore, after A, you will find G as the next lower pitch, and the pattern repeats. Here is a bass clef example. The first line starts on a G2. After that is B, then D, F, and the last line is A. The first ledger line above the bass clef staff is C4. Next are the spaces. First space is A, then C, next is E, then G, and the last one is B. You can see this follows a pattern. Each line skips a letter in the alphabetical sequence. Music notation alternates between lines and spaces. You'll see when they're put next to each other that the alphabetical sequence won't be skipped. Memorize the lines and memorize the spaces. This will make it easier for you to read on the fly. Here is a treble clef example. The first space starts at F4, followed by A, then C, next is E, and finally G. The first line starts on an E4. After E is G, next is B, then is D, and the last one is F. The first note on the ledger line above the treble clef staff is A5. It's the same idea for alto and tenor clefs. Here's a picture of how those are notated. For these clefs, middle C starts on the line where the two arches meet. Again, be sure to use the note hertz diagram for more help. The staff is also extended by the use of ledger lines to express notes that are higher or lower than the staff can show. Here's how the staff is extended. The same pattern is followed as the regular lines and spaces within a staff, but the pitch sequence is extended. For piano music, you may see bass clef notes that go high above the staff, and these notes will actually just be written in the treble clef instead. The same is true in reverse. Instead of using ledger lines for treble clef notes that go lower than the staff, the notes are simply written in the bass clef. It's also possible you will see a clef change in the middle of the piece for convenience. We will take the importance of keys into more consideration in an upcoming video about keys and key changes. Keys would be found after the clef sign and before the time signature. In early music notation, which started to break away from the learn-by-rote tradition, there usually weren't any written tempo indications. This is because the leader of the musical group already knew the tempo from past experiences and would dictate or conduct each note duration. Tempo markings weren't popular until the metronome was invented in the early 1800s. You'll see some of these words that indicate a certain BPM range or a specific BPM number specified. It's also possible to speed up the pace of the piece or slow it down by adding a tempo marking within the piece, not just at the beginning. One example is the fifth movement from Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, which undergoes several tempo changes. This example starts at allegro and ends allegro assai, which roughly translates to from fast to very fast. We will further explore tempo and rhythm in the performance techniques video lesson about rhythm and time. Once you have the metronome marking, it's easier to understand note durations. A whole note consists of 4 beats. A half note has 2 beats per marking. A quarter note is 1 beat. The subdivision of the beat continues with eighth notes, which fits 2 equal length eighth notes in a single beat. 16th notes subdivide 1 beat into 4. You can see that the note flags, or beams, add a line, which means the subdivision of a single beat is doubled, based on the amount of lines added to the stem, which means that a 32nd note has 3 flags and represents one of the 8 subdivisions of a single beat. The equivalent symbols for rests, which follow similar descriptions, are shown here. Division and subdivision are important words that I use to refer to the division of an octave and subdivision of rhythmic beats in a measure. Although different things are being divided, they both have that in common, and you can view music as the observation of subdivisions of rhythm and specific octaves over time. On another level, the dynamic behavior applies to the musical term dynamics, which refer to the changing of volume coming from the instruments. There are several layers of interwoven meaning that will strengthen your understanding of music and music notation. The time signature, which can be found after the clef and key at the beginning of a piece or a new measure, will show how many beats per measure to expect before a new measure line shows up. Common time with a C sign, or 4/4, means you should expect 4 quarter note durations at the rate of the metronome marking before the next measure is shown. Notice the downbeats and upbeats. 3/8 means you should expect 3 eighth note durations before the next measure is shown. You may also notice a pickup note, or pickup measure, which will last for a duration less than the first full measure of music. Just like the tempo can be changed in the middle of a piece with a marking, a time change can be indicated as well. This example shows the time signature changing from 2/2 to 3/2. A good trick to figure out how many beats to expect from these indications is to take the first number to mean there are X number of Y per number, where Y is the kind of beat. The kind of beat refers to a whole note, 1, a half note, 2, a quarter note, 4, an eighth note, 8, and so on. This means at this point you stop expecting 2 half notes per measure and now expect 3 half notes per measure. Finally, if you see the fermata symbol, that means that note needs to be held out longer than indicated. You will usually see these at the end of a piece or at the end of a smaller phrase. Later on in music theory analysis, you will see that musical ideas can be measured by how long they are represented in written measures, and how those recognizable phrases will help you identify the patterns and larger musical forms. A repeat sign bracket indicates that the previous musical idea will be repeated from the beginning only the first time you see it. If you see a number above the repeat sign bracket, you follow the music until you see the number 1, and then you repeat the music the first time. Then you follow 2 the second time, and so on. If you see DC, it means da capo, which translates to go back to the beginning. DC al fine means restart from the beginning and end where it says fine. DC al coda means to go back to the beginning, but then skip to the coda when it says to coda again. DS means the sign. DS al fine means go back to the DS symbol and repeat until you see the word fine. By contrast, DS al coda means repeat from the DS sign instead. And once you arrive at the coda symbol, jump to the next coda symbol to end the piece. That one is rare though. Dynamics indicate the level of volume at a certain point in time for that music. The volume level will be changing according to the definition of the dynamic word used. PPP stands for pianissimo, which is very, very soft. PP stands for pianissimo, which means very soft. P is piano, which means soft volume. MP is mezzo piano, which means medium soft. MF means mezzo forte, medium loud. F stands for forte, which means loud. FF means fortissimo, very loud. FFF means fortissimo, very, very loud volume. Also, here are the signs for crescendo and diminuendo, or decrescendo, which mean to gradually increase or decrease the volume during that time, respectively. You can see in this example, pianissimo crescendos to mezzo forte from the first to the second measure. Then, in the third measure, the crescendo reaches a fortissimo, which also includes a sign for decrescendo or diminuendo, and the volume ends at a piano in the fourth measure. Accents indicate a specific way to start or end a note. For example, a dot means staccato, which indicates the note should end earlier than indicated, while legato means the opposite, and the note should last the full duration without any breaks until the next note is articulated. Also, if you see one of these curved lines over a group of notes, that indicates that those notes in between the first and the last should be slurred without any articulation or separation. SF, which stands for sforzando, means to start the note with a louder and heavy articulation because it translates to suddenly with force. And if you see SFP for sforzando piano, it means suddenly with force, but then the rest of the note should be much softer. Piano. This means the sudden changes in volume cause the dramatic effect. Another accent mark you may see is the marcato sign. It looks like a small cone, which means to play with a heavy articulation at the start of the note, louder and shorter than legato. Accents are important for making music interesting, and if used effectively, can make every small musical decision influence a great performance. You can also compare it to mapping out the nuances of speech communication. We've covered the fundamentals of reading sheet music. You know how to identify pitches and are aware of their spatial importance. Everything else is a special expression indicator, which really goes into the finer details of a musical performance. Definitely consider a music dictionary to find more meanings. All it takes now is repetition, and your practice sessions will be more and more fruitful.